Hello, welcome to Lesson 7 of Mastering Java. Here we're going to learn about the switch statement in Java, and that's just a quick way to do comparisons and drive your program flow. The thing to keep in mind with the switch statement is that everything you can do with the switch statement can also be accomplished by other avenues in Java, such as if statements. You're going to come across that a lot. You're going to learn about a lot of different program control structures in Java. But there's a lot of overlap between them, and which one you pick really just depends on your specific application and what you're more comfortable with and so on. So here we're going to learn about switch, and you'll see how it can in many cases be useful. Let's say you're getting a grade in a class, and that grade can be A, B, C, or D, so we'll call it grade. And let's initialize the grade to be an A. All right, that's a pretty good grade. So we've done something like this in similar examples in previous lessons. But let's go ahead and print some messages out on the screen dependent upon what grade that I've actually have. Notice when I define the variable grade, I define it as a character variable, and so when I'm assigning the value to it, I put it in single quotes here. That's what we do when we deal with character variables. So obviously the possibilities for grades are A, B, C, D, and F. And so we want to print something out special for each one of those cases. And that's why we use the switch statement as an easy way to do that. So the way to handle that is you could say switch, and you put in parentheses the variable that you're actually testing. So in this case, we're checking all the possibilities of what the variable grade can be. So we're saying, hey, switch the variable grade here. And then you need to open a curly brace and hit enter, which puts a closing curly brace here. Now everything inside of these two curly braces, this one and this one, comprises what we call the switch statement here. Now when we talk about switch, we really are comparing the variable that we list here against different possibilities. So we know A, B, C, and D are all possibilities. So we'll have different cases, and that's where we use the keyword case. So you say case, and then you just put it in there, for instance, in a single quote, since we're talking with a character. Case A, you put a colon like this, and then underneath it you type in what should happen in the case of grade A as one that was selected. So in this case we'll put system.out.println like this, and then we'll say you made an A. Excellent job. Okay, so that's what's going to happen if the grade is A. Now we can go under here, and you need to put the keyword break, and I'll explain what that means in a minute. You put a semicolon after it. I'll come right back to break in just a second. Let's look at a different case. So we back up the indentation. We do case. What is another possibility? Case B. So you put a colon there, and then we're telling Java, okay, for case A, if the grade is equal to the character A, print this out and then break out of the switch statement and continue execution. Now we're going to look at case B. So we'll do system.out.println like this, and then we'll say you made a B. Good job. So that's pretty good. All right. And again, underneath that you need a break statement that tells Java once case B is located, and if it agrees with that, we execute what's in here, and then we break out of the switch statement. I'll explain a little bit more about that a little bit later. We'll do case C, which is also in single quotes, and then we'll do system.out.println, and then we'll say you made a C. You did okay. That's just okay. It's average. And then we can just keep going down here. Case D. Actually, one thing we need to add here is a break statement. And then we can also make this a little easier to read here by putting spaces, blank lines or something underneath this guy. We can kind of make that a little bit easier to read. Under case D, we will put colon, and then we have system.out.println. You made a D. You did poorly. All right, so let me kind of stop for a second. We'll put the break statement here. And let's discuss what we have so far. What's basically going on here is we've created a switch block, a switch statement with a block. We have an opening curly brace. Here's the corresponding closing brace. So everything inside of it, all of these case statements really make up what we call the switch. And you can make this a little easier to read, by the way, if you want to. You can leave it like this, or you can indent these things in Sometimes you see code written with all the cases actually indented in. Java doesn't really care what the spacing looks like on the screen. It's all the same to it, but sometimes it's a little easier to read. So inside of the switch, you're comparing the variable grade against various possibilities. Now this is a character variable, so the possibilities are all going to be different characters. If the grade is an A, then we're going to print this out, and then we hit the break statement, and that breaks you out of the switch block completely. That means that we break out of here and we continue execution after the switch block is over with. In other words, this is almost like a menu. You know, when you're in a main menu, you know, in old-time computers where you have to hit number 1 or number 2 or number 3, or maybe a telephone menu where you're typing something into the phone into the menu system. Well, basically there's a case statement running back there, and whenever you type one of them into the menu on the phone, then you execute that, and then when you're done, the phone call ends, right? Well, the same thing sort of happens here. You execute one of these things, and only one of them, and whenever you finish executing in here, the break statement punches you out of the switch completely, and then you continue on in the program. All right? So we have case A, case B, case C, case D. Those are all of the main cases here, but there's one more. I could put case F. I could put case F, and in fact I will, just to show you, case F, and then I could put system.out.println, and then I could say you made an F, you failed. Alright, so there's a few things I want to show you here. Let's run it first of all. It says you made an A, excellent job. This is all driven on what I have chosen for my grade here. If I put a B down here, you made a B, good job. If I put a C, then of course you made a C, you did okay. If I do a D, you did poorly. And if I change it to F, then you made an F, you failed. Now notice that we're doing an exact comparison. So if I put a lowercase f here, that's a different character, so nothing happens. In other words, it looks to see if it matches this, or this. None of them match since this is a lowercase f, so we just skip over all this stuff and the program ends. All right. Another thing I want to point out to you is we have here case F, right? But what if the user accidentally types in something else? I mean, they should type A, B, C, D, or F, but what if they accidentally type H? Well, that's not even valid. So you can have, in the switch statement, you can have a default guy here. This is almost like the else statement. Here we can say system.out.println. We can say you made an invalid entry. One thing we need to add before we move on is a break statement here, and then we don't need anything at the end over here. So let's go ahead and enter this guy. We're running it. We still have a grade of F, so we still trigger this guy here, but let's say we enter something crazy in like T, a grade of T. So we hit this guy and it says you made an invalid entry because we compare against A, B, C, D, and F. None of those trigger. Well, if none of them trigger, then it gets to the default statement, and that one's going to trigger no matter what. So typically when you're doing the switch statement, you want to have a break after each and every one of these statements, and then you have the one at the very end that's almost like the else clause that catches everything else. Now, if any of these cases are triggered before that, then the break statement pops you out of the switch completely. You bypass everything, but if you don't get to any of these cases, if none of them trigger, then you trigger the default, which in this case is just telling you that you made an invalid entry. Alright, so that pretty much covers the basics of the switch statement with the case classifications. I want to show you that this doesn't just apply to letters here. So let me go and delete all of this stuff. We still have our switch, we still have all of this. So let's change this up a little bit, and let's say we have an integer. So you can do a switch statement with integers. Integer number of siblings. Number of siblings. And let's start it off and just say that, for the sake of argument here, it's number 1. Now we want to do a switch on the number of siblings, so num siblings, like this. All right. So in other words, I may ask you, or take keyboard input to ask you how many siblings you have, how many brothers and sisters. In this case, I'm not taking keyboard input, I'm just assigning it as a variable, but you might imagine where I ask the user to type that value in. So here we know that they can enter 0, they can enter 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I mean, technically people could have 8 or 9 siblings, but once you get up into 10 or 11, 12 siblings, it's very unlikely that you're going to have anyone that has that many brothers and sisters. But in any case, we could do a case statement on the number of siblings. So just like we've done before, we're testing this variable here, and then we do case 0, system.out.println, and then we could say you have 0 siblings, right? And then of course we want to have our break statement there. Then we could have case 1, and then we could have system.out.println, you have 1 sibling, and so on. I think you can see how this goes. We don't need to continue on forever. What I want to do though is take this whole case number 1, including the break, I'll copy it, Control C, I'll come back here and I'll paste it down. I'll change this to a case 2, and then we'll have 2, and I'll do it one more time, case 3, and then you have 3, and follow me on here. I'll just do one more time. I lied. We'll do one more time, case 4, 4, and then let's give a default here. Default system.out.println, you have too many siblings to count. In other words, if they have more than 4, right, in this case, then our program's not going to handle it. Let's just say I could keep this going until they get to 10 siblings, but the point is not how many siblings they have. The point is to show you how it works. It behaves exactly the same. We have a variable with the number of siblings. If there's 0, it just tells you have 0, and it breaks out, which means the switch is exited completely. And then you can have 1, 2, 3, or 4. I'm just showing you that it works with integers as well as it does with characters. So if we save this and run it, it'll tell me you have 1 sibling. I could change this to 0, and it tells me I have 0 siblings. I can change this to 4. We did our all the way up to number 4 here. And then of course if I do something crazy like 7 and I run it, you have too many siblings to count. So the point is, the switch statement is a way for you to take a variable and compare it against for equality against lots of different cases, and that's why they're called case statements here. They're either going to be comparing against numbers or characters, typically is what you're going to be using. You could use this to drive a menu system. You could have a menu on the screen and it would say press 1 for help, press 2 to run the program, press 3 to do something. You can have a menu system driven by case statements where everything in here is what your program is executing whenever that menu entry is entered. But keep in mind, everything you can do with switch, you can also do with if and else if statements. It's just going to look a little different, and some people like to look at the way the switch is laid out, and it's a little bit easier to read. It is more concise, especially if you have easy to identify paths through your code like this with 0, 1, and 2, and so on. The one thing that you need to remember, though, is with switch, you're comparing for equality. You're checking to see if this is equal to 0. If this is equal to 1 and equal to 2 and so on. You're not comparing less than, greater than, and all that. So in many ways, the if statements are much, much more powerful because you can compare for equality and you can also compare for greater than, less than. But in any case, it's something you'll need to know, something you'll run into for sure. What I'd like you to do now is go work the exercise that we've set up for you to give you some practice with the switch statement in Java. And I think as you work with it, you'll find that it's versatile and it's very easy to use.